Today, we're diving into a concept that's central to the lives of over 1 billion people, Sholat, or Islamic prayer. But we're not just talking about the physical motions. Nope, we're going to explore it as a profound spiritual ascent, a journey from a simple action to an entire state of being.
So let's kick things off with a question that really gets to the heart of it all. Is prayer something we do, or is it something we can become? I want you to just hold on to that question as we go through this, because it changes everything.
Okay, so what is salat, fundamentally? Well, in its essence, it's a direct line of communication with God. It's way more than just words and movements. Think of it as an expression of servitude, a moment of total self-surrender, and this deep, internal knowing of divine oneness. That's our starting point.
To really get this, we're going to look at Sholat as a journey that moves through 4 distinct spiritual layers, taking us from the familiar outward ritual to a profound inner reality. This is where it gets really interesting.
So here's our roadmap. First, we start with the physical ritual, the part we can see. Then we move inward to build the inner connection. From there, that connection expands into what's called the spiritual life, where it's always on. And the final destination? Total surrender, a state known as fana. Let's break each of these down.
All right, layer 1. This is what most people think of when they hear prayer. The physical act of the 5 daily prayers. You know, the standing, the bowing, the prostrating. This is the foundation, and it's absolutely crucial. It's the framework, the structure that everything else is built on, a powerful symbol of obedience and submission.
Now, from that physical base, we move inward to layer 2. This is where the heart shows up. The ritual isn't just emotion anymore. It actually evolves into zikr, which is the active remembrance of God. The goal here is to achieve khushu, a state of such deep, total concentration that the world around you just fades away. The connection becomes purely internal.
And in the 3rd layer, that inner connection starts to expand. It breaks free from the 5 specific prayer times and becomes a continuous, 24/7 state of awareness. This is the perspective of makrifat, or higher spiritual knowledge. Suddenly, your whole life becomes a prayer. Every action, every thought is touched by this consciousness of the divine.
And that leads us to the final layer, the deepest one, total surrender, or fana. At this stage, the ego, that little voice of I, me, mine, it just dissolves. The individual self gets absorbed into the awareness of God. It's a state where you don't even feel like you are praying anymore. Instead, your entire being, every single breath, has become the prayer itself.
So what does that actually look like in real life? How do you live this out? Well, it all comes down to applying these higher layers to this concept of a continuous, unbroken connection.
There's a term for this, Sholat daimun. It literally means continuous prayer, and it describes this internal state where your heart is just always turned towards God, no matter what you're doing. You could be at work, you could be with your family. That connection is always there, humming in the background.
And this chart, this really makes it click. The conventional view sees prayer as an obligation, right? A physical act you do at set times. But the makrifat view, that deeper spiritual understanding, sees it as a whole way of life, a constant state of being, an inner awareness. The journey is all about transforming prayer from something you do into something you are.
Now you might be thinking, wow, this is deep. Where does all this come from? Well, these ideas aren't just made up. They are deeply, deeply grounded in the foundational sacred texts of Islam, all pointing to this more profound meaning of prayer.
For instance, one of the most powerful ideas you'll find in these texts is that a single moment within the physical prayer is actually the closest point of intimacy you can have with the divine. There's a famous saying from the Prophet Muhammad that states the absolute closest a person gets to God is in that moment of prostration, the sujud. That physical act of putting your forehead to the ground. It's the ultimate symbol of humility. And in that humility, you find the ultimate closeness.
But the texts go even further, offering this just breathtaking metaphor for the whole experience. Prayer isn't just something you do down here on earth. It's framed as your own personal spiritual ascent.
This well-known saying frames prayer as the believer's mirage, their own spiritual ascension towards the divine presence. Just think about that. It suggests that every single time a believer prays with real presence and concentration, they are embarking on their own personal journey toward God.
So when you put all these pieces together, you start to see Sholat not as a bunch of separate events, but as a single, lifelong spiritual ascent. and the true purpose of that journey becomes crystal clear.
At the end of the day, Sholat is the journey from the outer ritual to the inner reality. It's the bridge. It's what transforms something that might feel like an obligation into a constant, living, breathing connection with the divine.
And a verse from the Quran gives us the ultimate why. God says, to establish prayer for my remembrance. So the goal isn't just the act itself. The final goal is consciousness, awareness, a heart that never ever forgets its source.
And that brings us right back to where we started, but with a totally new perspective. If prayer is not just an action, but a state of being, if every moment, every single breath can be a form of remembrance and connection, then the final question we're left with is this: what are you communicating?